Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about dumbbells and why they are such a useful tool for hypertrophy. And when I say that, I don't want people to misinterpret that as me saying that dumbbells are the best tool. Because it seems like oftentimes when you make a statement like something is a really good tool and extremely useful and extremely valuable, that then they assume that you're saying that's the only thing you should ever do, and if you do anything different, you're dumb. Because the truth is, a lot of our base work needs to come from barbells. As far as a lot of base building goes, barbells themselves are slightly better in many ways to dumbbells, particularly for strength purposes, right? Doing the biggest movements possible and handling heavy weight. So I personally tend to view dumbbells as a supplemental lift. Any sort of dumbbell movement is a supplemental lift. But as far as supplemental lifts go, dumbbells bring a lot to the table, particularly as secondary exercises. And there's a number of reasons why. Now, a lot of it has to do with versatility and bringing new angles to the table because, again, what's the best way to build a muscle? What's the best exercise? To do two different really good exercises for a muscle, right? Slightly different angles. And a lot of people will say, oh, it's because the dumbbells load both sides evenly. No, they don't. They don't load both sides any more evenly than a barbell does. That's denying basic physics and not even looking at what's going on in movements if you think that. So that's actually not the case. However, the independent motion of them can be a factor. But high on the list, watch these movements I'm doing. What do we see in common? Right? Between the benching, right? The presses, the chest presses, the rowing. The dumbbells travel around our body. We can get a longer range of motion oftentimes with dumbbells, right? We can take dumbbells into ranges of motion where a barbell hits our body, right? Whether it's a row, whether it's an overhead press, a chest press, right? Certain types of curls, like you'll see the incline curls in here later. We have a better ability to track around our body with the dumbbell because the bar tends to hit our body. Now, there are bars that are designed to work around this. So you guys know I'm big on specialty bars. I have a ton of specialty bars and I use my specialty bars. I use them very heavily. But when we start looking at dumbbells, they inherently just do not get in the way. Like, look right here what I'm doing with that. The dumbbells can just go right through my face, right? To where if it was a barbell, I'd be going through my face. It would be a skull crusher. So when I do barbells, I have to go behind the head at a different range of motion. The chest presses, hands go deeper. They go further down to where the bar is not capable of going. Incline curls, you can't curl that far back with a barbell of any type to get that stretch reflex at the bottom. So when we start looking at some of the ranges of motion involved, it's not just about full range of motion, because range of motion doesn't always guarantee more hypertrophy. It can oftentimes have more potential for it, you bet. It's not automatically more hypertrophic. It's not automatically superior stimulus. Keep that in mind. It can be oftentimes. And it's a useful thing to look at. But it's not always the case. Doubling your range of motion will almost always be the case, with some exceptions that have been found for certain muscles. But just a couple inches may not. But it still makes it useful. But what we do get with a lot of these is also the ability to get a stretch reflex. Look at the incline curl. It gets a stretch reflex that we cannot get with a barbell. Because we're able to get our arms behind us and then hit that stretch position, we can get a stretch reflex on the muscle. Well, stretch reflexes on a muscle have been shown to contract more muscle fibers at the top as a response. Okay, so you get a stronger neuromuscular contraction because of that stretch. And when you get to the peak contraction at the top, oftentimes it actually even recruits more muscle fibers at the top as well. Okay, stretch reflexes are fantastic for hypertrophy. And we're not saying that every exercise needs to be a stretch reflex, but I would say that you do want to try to get a stretch reflex on one exercise on every muscle if possible, right, throughout your training. We get a really good stretch reflex on those incline curls. The same thing with the dumbbell press, right? we can get a stretch reflex on the pec at the bottom that we can't quite get as pronounced with on a barbell. Because with the barbell, not only do we touch the chest, it stops on the chest. It's not going to ever stretch. That's why usually we end up with more hypertrophy on the chest if we just pause with the barbell. Right? It ends up requiring the pecs to fire harder. We don't need that pause with the stretch reflex. Same thing with those tricep extensions, right? Now, with the dumbbells, we could argue, well, you can get a little bit there on the lats, but, we can get that from a chin-up. But, yeah, you can get a little bit on the lat there. But you could do the same thing with a barbell. It does let you on a dumbbell row, though, get higher up. But that stretch reflex is really a big deal. That's one of the things that makes dumbbells extremely useful. Then another thing that we look at some of the multi-joint movements. So look at the dumbbell press, for example. This is where the slight instability and the ability of the hands to change angles matters. So if we're locked into a fixed range of motion or plane of motion, particularly with a machine, the muscles will always fail in the same order. When the weakest muscle reaches failure on a machine, on a multi-joint movement, the exercise ends. Right? When whatever muscle is limiting it becomes fatigued, that's the one that gets the brunt of the work. With a barbell, it's a little less, but you're still locked into a specific hand position range of motion. When we're dealing with the dumbbell, we're not locked into that. So what happens? If the pec versus, say, a certain part of the pec starts to fatigue more, right? Let's say the part of the pec involved with the lockout, which again is where we squeeze in the middle. The dumbbells tend to move inward a little bit at that point, right? To squeeze that part of the muscle. If that part starts getting fatigued, we can lock out an inch wider, 2 inches wider at the top, and get another rep and use a different part of the chest for the lockout, or maybe a little more tricep for the lockout. When we're at the bottom, if our front delt is getting too fatigued, we can adjust our hand position. In other words, if the front delt is starting to get too fatigued, sometimes we will naturally use compensatory strength to maybe turn our elbows out another inch at the bottom to allow the pec, which hasn't been as fatigued, to take over. Or it can work the other direction. Maybe the pec is running out of energy and the anterior delt has a little more left. We might actually tuck a little more on one more rep, 2 more reps. Why does this matter? Because it allows us to more completely fatigue more than one muscle, or more than one part of the muscle. In other words, we are no longer limited completely by the weakest thing in the chain. We can adjust our position because the hands are moving independently, and we'll tend to do it naturally. It's not like we have to concentrate on it. If we keep trying to push a set close to failure, we will use compensatory strength to do that. And with the dumbbell, it makes it easier to do it. So the end result is that one extra rep that we're able to complete allows us to fatigue a secondary part of a muscle or another muscle a little more that had a little bit left. The end result, more potential hypertrophy. And I want people to understand these aren't big differences. It's not like, oh yeah, this is going to equal 10% more muscle growth or 20%. No, but it is a little bit. And it makes these a very, very valuable tool, particularly when compared or paired together with a barbell exercise, right? When they're paired together, it really brings a lot to the table, right? That's a great way to get maximum hypertrophy in all the muscles involved. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.